first thing that you might want to note about postmodernism is that it doesn't have a shred of gratitude. And there's something pathologically wrong with a person who doesn't have any gratitude, especially when they live in what so far is the best of all possible worlds. And so if you're not grateful, you're driven by resentment, and resentment is about the worst emotion that you can possibly experience apart from arrogance. Resentment, arrogance, and deceit. There's an evil triad for you. So you have to educate yourself about postmodernism. Okay, so here's what the postmodernists believe. They don't believe in the individual. That's the logos part. Western culture is fell logocentric. Logo is logos. That's partly the Christian word, but it's also partly the root word of logic. Okay? They don't believe in logic. They believe that logic is part of the process by which the patriarchal institutions of the West continue to dominate and to justify their dominance. They don't believe in dialogue. The root word of dialogue is logos again. They don't believe that people of goodwill can come to consensus through the exchange of ideas. They believe that that notion is part of the philosophical substructure and practices of the dominant culture. So the reason they don't let people who they don't agree with speak on campus is because they don't agree with letting people speak. You see, it's not part of the ethos. Okay, so what else do they believe and not believe? They believe that since you don't have an individual identity, your fundamental identity is group fostered. And that means that you're basically an exemplar of your race, hence white privilege, or you're an exemplar of your gender or your sex or your ethnicity, or you're an exemplar of however you can be classified so that you are placed in the position of victim against the oppressor, because that's the game. And it's a post-Marxist sleight of hand, right? The old Marxist notion was that the world was a battleground between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and that failed to have any philosophical or ethical standing, that argument, after the working class actually saw its standard of living massively elevated as a consequence of Western corporate democracy, Western free enterprise democracy, and also as a consequence of the revelations of everything terrible that had happened in every bloody country that ever dared to make equity and the Marxist communist dogma part of their fundamental structure, right? And nothing but murderousness and oppression. And so by the 1970s, it was evident that that game was up. The postmodernist Marxists just basically pulled a sleight of hand and said, okay, if it's not the poor against the rich, it's the oppressed against the oppressor. We'll just redivide the subpopulations in ways that make our bloody philosophy continue in its movement forward, and that's where we're at now. And so for the postmodernists, the world is a Hobbesian battleground of identity groups. They do not communicate with one another because they can't. All there is a struggle for power. And if you're in the predator group, which means you're an oppressor, then you better look out, because you're not exactly welcome. And neither are your ideas. So that's what you're up against.
I'm a mechanical man.
So I would say the humanities and much of the social sciences has turned into a postmodern neo-Marxist playground for radicals. And so all of you who are sitting here are funding a postmodern radical neo-Marxist agenda that has its roots in the university, and your tax money is going towards that. And if you want proof of that, you just go online and look at the websites, especially of disciplines like women's studies, which is pathological right to the core. But it's not just women's studies, it's all the ethnic studies groups. It's anthropology, it's sociology, it's social work, and most of all, it's education. It should be defunded. It's as simple as that. They don't do the research they purport to do. They're not interested in at all in education. They're interested in the indoctrination of people as young as they can get their hands on, so to speak.
I'm a mechanical man.
Now, hypothetically, It's an attitude of skepticism, irony towards rejection of grand narratives, ideologies, and universalism. Criticizes objective notions of reason, human nature, social progress, absolute truth, and objective reality. It's predicated on the idea that the reason that you categorize, especially, the reason that you categorize is to marginalize. You categorize to marginalize to obtain power. Power is pretty much all there is. There's other elements of postmodernism. One of them is that human nature is merely a social construct. See, the reason for that, as far as I'm concerned, and this is a postmodern critique as well, I'm going to move the center to the margin and the margin to the centers. Why would you think that human nature is only a social construct? Well, here's why. It's because that means you could construct it any way you want to. That was a very common idea among the communists. That's why Mao wanted to wipe out Chinese history. That's why the Red Guard went around in China and tried to destroy everything, every element of China's history prior to approximately 1960. That great culture, thousands and thousands of years old. So you could bring in the new man. Well, what is the new man? Well, it was whatever slave Mao happened to fantasize about. Or it was the utopian person. You take your pick, but like I said, if you take a look at the corpses, you pretty much figure out which of those two it was.